we're celebrating a really significant Black History Month this year because this year is the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, which is the event that leads us to freedom for slaves in the South. And we're celebrating 50 years of the March on Washington, which is an event that leads us toward equality.
Quite frankly, if I look at my lineage, I can't go much further back than my great-grandfather. That's about it, because they were the products of, they were owned by slave owners, and they were slaves within the southeastern community.
My grandfather was a college graduate. He was a slave, and his slave masters were kind and believed in an education.
Connecting the fate of slavery to the fate of the nation was important for the preservation of the Union. But the difference is it became a war of liberation from that point on, because now the war was also about freedom.
So to me, the Emancipation Proclamation was kind of a first step of an unrealized sense of freedom that I thought that I should have. I know that I should have. My parents told me I should have it, but yet I didn't have those opportunities.
For slaves in this area, it came almost 2.5 years later, after the Emancipation Proclamation, when Major Henry Upton marched into Augusta. Slaves were brought to what was called the Commons, now where May Park is, and were told that they were free. And a Union missionary, a Northern missionary who had come to the Augusta area, wrote about this event. And he said when they were told that they were unconditionally free, they and their children forever, a great shout went up from every voice and apparently from every heart as they realized they were no longer under the galling yoke of slavery.
Maybe to someone who was a slave, who watched what happened when that proclamation was made, that substantial change was very, very important. But that was only the beginning process, and that's the reason I call it a process that was, at the time that I grew up, was still unfulfilled.
And so the Emancipation Proclamation started what the 13th Amendment to the Constitution would finish. It ended involuntary servitude and slavery in this country. However, the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment may have brought freedom, but they did not bring equality.
The March on Washington and the Emancipation Proclamation at the crossroads of freedom and equality. The March on Washington wasn't the culmination of civil rights activism. However, it represented a continuation of civil rights activism.
The March on Washington occurred in the summer before my 10th grade year. But I didn't just hear about it. I mean, this is a grassroots organizational process.
They were organized. The first thing, you had to vow that you were not going to be violent. Otherwise, they didn't want you to come.
The African American pursuit of equality is embedded in our understanding of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Sure, you were angry. Sure, you resented many of the things that you had to accept. But the way to bring on change was to work together.
For the first time, I think that as a young person, personally, I got galvanized to the hope of a brand new movement.
The march brought to the attention of not only this country, but the world, that things had to change.
I understand King's last sentiment in that speech to be prophetic, in the sense that it represents an ongoing understanding that freedom and equality is never fully finished.
It's like starting a car. Doesn't take a lot of gas to start it, but you got to turn the switch on. The March on Washington turned the switch. But there was a lot of work yet to do, and quite frankly, even in our environment today, the work is still undone.
I would simply like to say that I think this has been one of the great days of America. And I think this march will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, demonstrations for freedom and human dignity ever held in the United States.